Finally, we're outside of the garage. This is the second drive of the car. Thought I'd bring you along. It's kind of a shakedown run. It's not really we're not going on a long drive, but I want to find out what works well, what doesn't work so well. So I thought I would bring you along and show you the car. So let's have a look around. So here's the car out of the garage. It's a 1968 Rover P5B Coupe, a four-door coupe. The B in P5B stands for Buick. That's who Rover bought the engine design from, and they changed it and manufactured it in the UK. The car is far from perfect, but it's not too bad from afar. If we walk around, one of the things I love about these is the styling, especially the coupe. Some people prefer the saloon. Personally, I like the coupe. I like the kind of shallow glass house of it and all the detailing, and I think just generally David Batch at Rover did a superb job of styling it. Quick walk around. I mean, for a 1958 design, I think it stood up really well. It was certainly a big change for Rover compared to the P4. Let's have a look inside. So there's the interior and all its unfinished glory. A lot of it's done. I haven't fitted the door trims yet. I'm going to rust proof the doors, so the wood cappings on the doors are missing as well. They're in the back. But in terms of just checking mechanically how things are working, that's really why I've come out on this drive. You can see the coupe has the additional dials underneath the main dials. They were coupe only. Otherwise, really, there wasn't a lot of difference between this and the saloon. But for a 1958 car, I think it's really great styling, and the interior is lovely. Okay, so let's go for a bit of a drive. So, as I say, this is only the second shakedown run that we've done, or I've done. So I'll just close my window so we don't get quite so much noise. So let's drive around a bit and see how things go. So one of the things I love about driving this car is actually just driving it. It's just really easy to drive. I mean, it's a long way from modern cars and modern suspension and things like that. But actually, it's just incredibly smooth and easy to drive. The ride isn't perfect, especially over small ridges. It tends to smother out big things better than it does small ridges. But generally, it is a very comfortable and refined car, even by today's standards. The ride was actually criticised in some road tests at the time, but I mean, that's kind of just shows you how bad modern cars are in terms of ride comfort, that it's certainly a lot better than most modern cars. I mean, it's a 3-speed gearbox, so it's quite very slushy in terms of changing gear, but it's very smooth as well. This is actually quite a bumpy road, so hopefully the camera isn't wobbling around too much, but generally I am actually going to open the window because it's quite warm. Generally the car is very smooth to drive. The steering is very light. I mean, it's a big steering wheel and very slim by modern standards, the rim of it, but it's very light. It's Hydra steer, power steering. There's not a lot of feel through the wheel. You can steer with one finger, as the brochures show, but it actually reminds me a lot of driving a Range Rover. You sit quite high up. Everything is quite light. I think the way it rides isn't that dissimilar to a Range Rover. I mean, maybe that's, it's got a live rear axle, so it just kind of feels a bit like a Range Rover, but in a very good way. But as I say, it's a long way from a sports car. I mean, the styling of it I love. I think David Batch did an amazing job. I think he's kind of a very much underrated stylist. I mean, he did he tidied up a lot of the Range Rover and the Rover SD1 and the Rover P6. So he's got a real, I just think he's a really good stylist. The interior as well. I mean, you can see it's very nice. It's, for a car that was launched in 1958. So, that's 61 years old now. It's not at all bad. The interior was one of the things that people really loved about the car when it was launched. So let's just go a bit of a drive and see how we go. In terms of, this is kind of it's the second time I've driven it in several years, and I'm just trying to find out things that are wrong with the car. One of the things is the temperature gauge. It reads very high. You can probably see here I've got a digital temperature gauge, which I'm just playing around with. Actually, it's not a permanent fixture. I just kind of made it and put it in the car myself. But it's just to try and compare the actual engine temperature. But where the sensor is at the moment, it's not reading the right temperature, so that's kind of meaningless. The temperature gauge, it may be the thermostat, it may just be the gauge, but I want to, just for my own peace of mind, find out actually what the issue is there. What else to say about it? I mean, it's a 61-year-old design. This particular car was 1968. It was one of the early V8 P5Bs, and so it's got a high compression engine. I think 10.5 to 1 is the compression ratio. So it should run on 5-star fuel. Obviously, you can't get that now. There are labels in the engine telling you to run it on 5-star. I'm using super unleaded and it seems to run fine. I should probably put an additive in. I know there'll probably be people who are screaming and saying you should put an additive in, but for the amount of use this car gets, I haven't had a problem yet, but we'll see. There's no pre-ignition, there's no pinking with it, so as far as I can tell, it's fine. I'll just slow down and we'll just show kick down is working, which is one of the things that there you go, we're doing 60 and this road is national speed limit, so I'll just slow down a bit. So it does shift, it's pretty quick for such a big heavy car. It's by no means slow. It doesn't feel it because I think you're fairly well insulated from everything and you sit high up, so it doesn't really feel as fast as you are going, but it can shift. So it's just a lovely old thing to drive. I would love to drive it more, and when I've got everything sorted, then that's what I hope to do. Unfortunately, my wife thinks it's an old man's car, but I guess I'm becoming a bit of an old man anyway, so that's fine. I just think it's kind of, in a very uncool way, very cool. So I love it. It's a kind of it's an odd thing, because growing up in the UK, obviously you follow the trials and tribulations of British Leyland, and then Rover Group, Austin Rover, Rover Group, and then MG Rover. So Rover have a really bad reputation. They're not at all sought after cars, really. But up until the 70s, I mean, Rover, they, with the P4 that they launched just after the Second World War, they were called anti-Rovers, and although that wasn't actually kind of saying that the Rovers, there was a story behind that which I can't fully remember, but they were seen as very respectable, very safe, very just understated, classy cars. But then through the 50s they were working on jet turbine engines for the cars, and they hold speed records. They entered Le Mans with BRM, I think it was. So they were changing their image through the 50s, and obviously the Land Rover as well was part of that. And then in the 60s, I think 63, they launched the P6, which was really a really advanced car for the time. And then they launched the V8, so their image was changing through the 50s and 60s. But until really the mid-70s, when the SD1 was launched, which was a lovely car, but just really badly production engineered and built. Up until that point, Rover were, a very classy company. They built just nice, well-engineered cars, and I can see that in this car. There's nothing in it that is particularly amazing in terms of technology, but it's just a really nice thing to drive. It's not, as I say, it's not cool or trendy, but it's just a lovely old thing to drive and own. One of the other things I really find interesting is that it's a time capsule of a car. I grew up in the Midlands in the 70s, as some people may be able to tell from my accent, and the news was just full of factories closing, industrial action. It was just such a, not a depressing time, but a time of massive change within Britain. And so this really is a time capsule, because this car was made in 1968, and so much of I think everything pretty much is made in England, in the UK. I think Rover bought in a few bits for the hydraulic lifters for the valves in the engine were bought in from the USA, but pretty much I'd say 99% of the content of this car is made in England or made in the UK, and a lot of it made in the Midlands. So it's really, for me, kind of interesting that everything was a lot of it was made in the area that I grew up in, and all of that has gone now. Almost everything has got made in England, made in the UK, stamped on it or moulded into it. So it's really interesting in that respect as well. And I think for me it makes owning and using the car that much more interesting as well. So things that need sorting out, obviously the interior I need to finish. I need to still fit the rear shock absorbers, the new ones. The fronts are on and they seem okay. I need to do the rears. I need to, I think, bleed the brakes again. They still feel a bit spongy, so I'm going to bleed the brakes. And then a couple of little bits of welding I want to get done on it, and I want to get the front seats covered. But then a lot of the car is actually, the car will be usable then. So unfortunately we're at the height of summer, so it's probably going to be next year before I can really drive it a lot. I'm not going to use it a lot in the winter, but it's hopefully, I've got a lot more confidence in the car now than when I bought it. Just things like the wiring and mechanically, there were so many little things that hadn't been done well. So I feel a lot more confident in the car now than I did when I first bought it, which is, for me, I love old cars and I love using old cars, but I just hate wondering, is the thing going to break down on me? The other car that I drive fairly regularly is an Alfa, a 1972 Alfa GTV 2000 or 2000 GTV. It's a Bertone coupe, and that's been really reliable. You know, I think with any old cars, the worst thing you can do is kind of economise on maintenance. You know, if something is wearing out, then sort it out. Or if, you know, I mean, my personal bugbear is things like bodges in wiring. I mean, that's just going to come back and bite you, you know. So I kind of want cars to be as reliable as they should be. And you know, people think old cars are unreliable, but actually, I mean, when these cars were new, you know, they were not that unreliable. People relied on these things for their day-to-day, you know, getting to work and business and all sorts. So there's no reason why classic cars shouldn't be pretty reliable. And so that's certainly one of my kind of goals with this, is to make it a usable car. You know, not have to worry about taking it out and using it day to day. As I say, I don't tend to use cars in the winter. I tend to use modern car then, just because, you know, modern cars are better rust proofed and well, a bit more throwaway anyway than old cars. I did actually use the Alfa through several winters, but it did actually have quite an impact on the car. It needed quite a bit of work doing after that, bodywork. So yeah, I try not to use the cars in the winter if I can help it. But I'll shut up now and we'll just drive around a bit. So we're nearly back to where we started, so when we pull up, whoa, try and miss the birds. When we pull up, that's it until the next video.